Okay, what we're going to talk about in this video are the basic components or the basic structures of a neuron. Now, neurons come in multiple shapes, they come in multiple sizes, and they differ in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of structures found on neurons that are pretty much consistent with all the different types of neurons. So in this video, let's go through those basic structures, and then in future videos we can then discuss the complexities of the various different types of nerves. Okay, so the picture that we have on here right now, let's just go through some of these basic ones. I'm not going to do it in order of the numbers here. Okay, so let me start off with actually number 3. Let's see, where's my cursor? Here it is. So number 3 is actually referring to this entire structure on this. Okay, so that entire structure, let me just kind of get rid of that portion. Okay, that entire rounded structure, that one is going to be the cell body. Cell body is also given another name of soma. Okay, so sometimes you will hear the word soma, sometimes cell body, but the cell body is the basically the control center of the nerve within the cell body. Then we're going to go to number 2 on this one. Within the cell body, you're going to have the nucleus, and the nucleus has an abundance of ribosomes. And if you go back into a previous lecture, ribosomes make proteins. Okay, they're either free floating within the nucleus, you can find them free floating in the cytoplasm, or they're attached to the endoplasmic reticulum, okay, which then further processes proteins and so forth. So number 2 in this case is the nucleus. The space within the cell body, so kind of what fills up all this area, that is the cytoplasm. Okay, and within the cytoplasm of any cell, you are going to have your various organelles, endoplasmic reticulum, in which case you can have the ribosomes attached to it. You can have ribosomes free floating in the cytoplasm. So you're going to have all the different types of organelles within the cytoplasm of this one. Going to number 1 now, in this case, are these branches of these little fibers coming off. First, let's name them, then I'll briefly discuss them. And these are called dendrites. Okay, dendrites are relatively short processes that branch off of the cell body, and there can be many of them, as in this case that you're seeing on here right now, or there can be as little as 1. Okay, but they're just relatively short processes off of the cell body, and in a future episode when we talk about what's going on with them, the dendrites actually receive input, and that input is directed towards the cell body. Okay, so if I touch your skin, essentially we're stimulating the dendrites. The dendrites then sends that signal to the cell body, and then it moves that signal down. We haven't named where it goes to yet, so we'll get there. Okay, let's do number 6 next. Okay, number 6 is this wide structure here. It goes all the way down, and that's called the axon, A-X-O-N. Okay, and unlike the dendrite, where it's relatively a short process branching off of the cell body, the axon is typically longer, much longer than the dendrites, and it branches off of another structure called the axon hillock, which is going to be the number 5 here. So you can see that rounded circle right here, okay, and that's called the axon hillock. Okay, so the axon comes off of this axon hillock, and the axon hillock is a triangular cone-shaped structure off of the cell body. Okay, so let's put the dendrite cell body, axon hillock, and axon in a sequence. The dendrites receive input, so if I touch your skin, I'm stimulating the axons. It sends a signal towards the cell body. Cell body then sends that signal onto the axon hillock, and then the axon leaves the axon hillock. So the signal, if you will, goes from the dendrite to cell body to axon hillock to axon. Okay? And as we travel down the axon, we are, I'm going to skip 4 and 7 right now. Then we get down towards these end areas, and these are axon terminals. Okay, so the end of the axon, okay? And here's where the axon then can branch off into multiple areas like we're seeing on this picture. Those are called axon terminals. And right at the very end, and this picture doesn't show it, the very end of this, it widens up. Now, this is a little dramatic on that, but you can see how I'm making the very tip of that a little bit wider. Those would be called the synaptic knob. Okay. Knob, K-N-O-B. Okay. And when we covered the muscular system, and I drew the myoneural junction where I showed you part of the nervous system and it flares out into a widened area, I was referring to a synaptic knob. That's what this part here is, okay? Let's jump to number 4. Number 4 is this little structure. This is a part of the myelin sheath, or it's a fatty sheath that insulates the axon. Not all axons will have this. It's going to be determined in gray matter, white matter, so forth. That's called a neurolemmocyte. Neurolemmocyte. Neurolemmocytes. Okay, that is a cell that wraps around the axon, and as we can see, we have spaces in between all of these. Okay, so there's a space there. There's a space there, okay? So this is one cell, this is one cell, this is one cell, neurolemmocyte cell, and there's a small little space in between. Okay, that small little space is going to be number 7, which is going to be called a neurofibril node. Neurofibril, where's my cursor? Node. Okay, and if you're old school, this is also known as nodes of Ranvier. Okay, that's just another name for those. Ranvier, I guess, is the guy who discovered this. Okay, so what we have on here, basically we have the dendrites, which receives the input, sends that input towards the cell body. Cell body then sends it to the axon hillock. And when we talk about an action potential, that's going to originate at the axon hillock. Before that, it's going to be called a graded potential. So from a dendrite to the cell body leading to the axon hillock, that charge, that electrical charge that we're talking about, is going to be called a graded potential. From the axon hillock out, so down the axon, it's going to be called an action potential. And there are some differences in how between those two. So axon hillock to the axon. From the axon, we get to the axon terminals, and then we get to the synaptic knob. Now, this neuron will connect to one of a few different structures. It can connect to another neuron and transmit the signal along. It can connect with a muscle. So we discussed the skeletal muscle in our previous lectures. It can be smooth muscle, it can be cardiac muscle, but it can attach to some motor function on here. It can be sent to a gland. Okay, so those are your different structures that a neuron can connect to. Now, our next video, we're going to go into a little bit more detail on basically what's a nerve. This is a neuron, N-E-U-R-O-N. Now we're going to look at what is a nerve and point out what the key differences are. And like we spoke of in the muscular system, where we had the connective tissue surrounding muscle fibers, surrounding the fascicle or surrounding the whole muscle, we're going to have a similar structure or similar connective tissue surrounding parts of the nerve as well. So stay tuned for the next little lecture. Thanks.